Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. I've got a few bits and bobs to do out here today. The mounts need watering. The old RO unit was working its butt off yesterday. That's why the Vander bucket's missing at the moment. But I didn't finish producing, filling up all my containers yesterday, so I had to bring the RO unit indoors later in the day. If I left that outdoors in sub-zero temperatures, it would totally blow the membrane and it would be useless. So it has to come indoors back in the warm. When it's in use, the water's flowing through it, so you'd have to get down to about -20 or something stupid to freeze moving water. But I did notice this morning I went out and the water that was left in the bucket, left over from yesterday, is frozen. It had about a centimetre of ice over the surface, which I've just put my foot in to break. And now the RO unit's busying itself out there, filling that up, and then I'll top up the rest of my containers. And I think I've got to the point now where I need that second fogger. The weather we're getting, this may be the last bright sunny day, and it may not even last all day. The forecast says we're going to get some snow. Yeah, well, I'll believe it when I see it, but it looks quite possible. But we are getting very cold weather at the moment. Luckily in here, it doesn't really affect me except at night. If the sun's out during the day, I get the heat through the glass and everything's fine. And at night, my heater takes over and stops it dropping down too low. I think that might be costing a bit at the moment because it's cutting in and out quite frequently. But in the morning when I come down, the door here is virtually shut. There's just a little bit of airflow through. Otherwise the house chills down too much, basically. That will change as time goes on. But once I've got the house warm and I'm comfortable, I start gradually opening this door. And at that sort of time, well, recently the sun's been coming round like it is now. So the sun generates the heat in here. And then the process works the other way round. The heating can go off in the house and I can suck the heat out of here into the house. Save on my heating bill. But I think I'm going to need that second fogger soon. I mean, my humidity is 53% at just over 19 degrees at the moment. Well, the temperature's going to get up 23, 24. And when I'm working in here, I'm coming in and out frequently, so the door doesn't stay shut, so the humidity does drop down a bit. So I might think about getting the second one out. So it's just a few bits and bobs today while I go around watering the mounts, and a few viewers' requests as I go round if I come across the actual plants in question. But the first one is Todd asked how my Lodigessii was doing, because his is bursting out all over the place, he said. Well, sort of, so is mine. There are new growths starting in quite a few places. A nice little one at the back there. And the older canes from last year have got things pushing out at virtually every single leaf node. But because I haven't had the plant long enough, they may well be plantlets, kikis if you want to call them that, but strictly speaking on this plant they're not. So it's moving. I mean, it's back into the watering and feeding program now. Its winter rest is well and truly over. We got the day lengths. We're virtually up to 11 hours again, that magic figure. And we're getting bright days, so things are really starting to come back into growth. So keeping them dry is not the best of ideas this time of year. But yeah, there are lots of things coming out from the canes, some of which have got little roots. Now, I've seen on other dendrobiums where buds push out, and from the base of where the buds are, it also produces roots, which is a strange concept, but some do that. And I haven't had this plant long enough to see its annual pattern yet. I haven't had it a complete year. But the canes are producing something. I'm hoping that some of those are buds. I don't mind if all of them aren't, and some of them are plantlets. That's fine, that's how it grows. But I would like to see some buds on it. But it's certainly coming back into growth in some shape or form, and you know, the actual genuine new growths are showing quite nicely now. So yeah, it's coming back to life, and as I say, it's back into the watering and feeding program now. Got active new growths coming. Well, it's going to need some help, and just water, quite honestly, won't do it. It's going to need feed now. And when you get those active new growths like that, at the end of the day, these are orchids, but they're still plants, and at that point in time, it's going to use up the nitrogen pretty quick. You know, that's the main ingredient to push those growths out. Backed up by other things, yes, but you know, you can have very low nitrogen fertilizers where the other elements are more dominant. Well, that's fine sort of in autumn and winter. But once you get back into your active growth, you need a good balance, and you need a good proportion of nitrogen in there. You know, I mean, a lot of people use something like a fertilizer that says 10, 10, 10. Well, the 10 in the middle doesn't get used as much as people have thought in the past, shall we say, so it's not quite as necessary as we thought. But certainly the 10 at either end are required, along with the other elements. Get some, you know, calcium, magnesium in there as well. It's proportionate, you know, there's no need to go mad in any one single element, but fertilizers like 25, 10, 15, that's a very high percentage of nitrogen, which is great for all sorts of plants and vigorous orchids, but I think that nitrogen might be a little bit high for general use around an orchid sort of place. You know, a lot of them aren't pushing out that much growth that they need that much nitrogen, and if you keep the nitrogen too high, you end up with what I call wishy-washy growths. You know, they're a bit spindly, they're a bit pale, because they're pushing on at a rate of knots without the backup of the other elements to balance it and get the colour in the leaves and, you know, the strength into it as well as the growth. So you know, a nice even balance, low doses very frequently, and you'll push the orchids on nicely, which is what I'm now coming to the point where I do need to start pushing my orchids a bit. And all that means is that they use the water a bit faster, so the frequency of watering comes round quicker. I'm not changing much else, it's just the frequency. I feed at low levels anyway, that's not going to change. I'd rather feed frequently at low levels than, you know, pure water for 3 or 4 and then stonk up the rate of knots of the fertilizer, because a lot of that will stay in the pot, quite honestly. It doesn't do a lot of good in there. So yeah, frequently, low frequencies with a good balanced fertilizer, and your orchids will start pushing on now. It's that time of year. I can't officially say it's spring yet, but we're certainly heading there. It's going to look funny if I go out in the garden tomorrow morning and everything's white. I can't wait to see what the cats make of it. That'll be fun. They'll go out and play, I expect, because it's a novelty. Anyway, I've got a few bits and pieces to pick up on, but that one was specifically asked for, so I've done that one now. And now I need to get some watering sorted out and crack on, so I'll see what else I can add in as I go round. Now, last time we looked at this Dendrobium primulinum, I was over the moon that we were starting some new growths, which I still am, and we had a bud. And I said, one's better than none. Well, some of the other canes are starting to push. I've got 3 on there, possibly 4, yeah. 1 there, 2, 3, 4. So there's going to be some more buds there. Now these, in a good environment with everything happy and healthy, normally push out a couple of buds per node, like in pairs, sometimes 3. When they're not doing so good, 1. But some are better than none, and it looks like it's going to be some. Now, both of these canes here were last year's growths, so if that one can bloom, so can that one, and it looks like it's swelling in places, so both of those canes may produce some blooms, but certainly this one is, and that one's doing its single bloom. That's an older cane. That's a 2-year-old cane, that one. But this is a truly deciduous dendrobium. You know, these new growths will push on, hopefully as big as these. There's a lot of growing to do in one season, so it's going to need some help out of there, me. And hopefully there'll be more than just 2. I mean, at the moment, this is actually 2 separate plants, if you look. Yeah, might even be 3. But if it can produce more than 1 new growth per plant, those are the 2 main plants there. They're the active ones. I don't think that other plant is up to much, but we shall see. In fact, that other little weak plant there is the one that's got the big bud on. But yeah, a couple of new growths, a couple more would be good, and then they'll grow on, they'll get their leaves, and they'll push on, and then during the winter rest they will dump all their leaves, and you get this look, this dead stick look. And if you don't like that look, these are not the types of dendrobiums you ought to be growing, because that's how they end up. They're what I call true deciduous. They lose their leaves every single year, and that's how they grow. And they lose their leaves late autumn into the winter. A couple might just about hang on till early spring, but not normally. They're gone. They're gone in a single season, and then they're replaced each year. And each time you get a new growth, you get a new set of roots. So they recycle themselves, you know, in an annual basis. And as such, they're very easy to understand what's going on. Probably the simplest of the lot. I think these blooms on this Brassavola nodosa have confirmed my suspicions. I think this plant may well have the dreaded lurgy, or signs of it, touches of it. It may not be totally too far gone, but if you look at the blooms, they haven't opened properly. Now, they've had plenty of time now. It's not like they haven't had long enough, but they haven't opened fully. But I mean, at least I've got the blooms, and at the first signs of new growth on this, it's coming off the mount and going in a pot, because the others I've seen seem to do better. But these blooms are misshapen. That's another one of the signs, you know. And this one is difficult to treat, unlike some others, because these leaves have evolved. They're like succulent leaves. They just don't absorb anything. They're actually designed to repel all liquids and sustain themselves in long dry periods as well. They're very drought tolerant, these plants. I don't recommend keeping them dry, but you know what I mean. They'll take it. And they're succulent, fleshy, thick leaves, and they just don't absorb any liquids. So the only liquids I can get into this plant are up through the roots, really. That makes it more difficult to treat than perhaps some other plants, where you come at the infection from 2 sides. You come at it down through the plant through absorption in the leaves and everything, and up through the roots into the base of the plant. But yeah, it's not a happy bunny. It has all the symptoms, new roots that just seem to stop growing for no apparent reason. Although the new growths pushed on okay, the 2 new growths with the blooms are smaller than previous growths, and the blooms are slightly distorted. So yeah, I think we've got a problem with that one. If I see the next new growths push on clean, up to full size, with roots that don't stop growing, then I'll know that at least the front end of the plant, where the leads are, has been treated successfully. If not, that may well have to go. You know, as I say, some plants just don't respond to treatment, and others respond well and recover quite quickly if you catch it soon enough. But yeah, this one's a difficult one to treat, as I say. But all the signs are there. Latest growth's a bit stunted, roots failing, blooms distorted. It's got all the symptoms. Didn't do it much good setting it back, breaking all the new leads off last year, but I'll have to look into that. If I lose this plant, it's not the end of the world. It's easily replaced. Brassavola nodosa comes up frequently, and quite honestly, I could probably buy a much bigger, better plant than that to replace it with. So yeah, I think you're on borrowed time. Now, Mr. Fuzzy One is being very silly at the moment. This is probably the result of just being out of season. Which is why it's doing strange things. I got this in the middle of last year, and mounted it up, and it grew on well during the growing season last year. But because it was relatively new, I didn't rest it. I carried on sort of watering it, not soaking it all the time, but making sure it was still hydrated through the winter. Now, under normal circumstances, this is a deciduous plant, so it will push out its new growths and then during the winter dump them all, and you end up with bare fuzzy canes, and that's where the blooms come from. And then it does it all over again, regenerates its roots at the same time as the new growths push on. But this one's doing everything all at the same time. It has new growths pushing on. It's now decided to do autumn on the most mature canes, so it's starting to lose its leaves on the mature canes, and it's pushing some buds out all at the same time, so it's being very silly at the moment. But hopefully this season will settle it down into a more regular routine. Oh, there's actually a bud on that top cane with the yellow leaf. If you look directly under the yellow leaf, there's a bud there too. So that cane looks like it might try and bloom. And there's a couple of buds on this largest cane as well. But that's what the cane should look like when it blooms. No leaves at all, just a hairy tarantula leg, basically. That's what they look like. So hopefully this year, this growing season, I can kick the season back into it, and then this winter it will, autumn and winter, it will dump its leaves and then it will bloom along with the new growths next year on the bare canes. That's really what it's supposed to do. So it's being a bit trying to do everything all at once here, poor little thing. But it's it's grown well and it's coming on. Now this dendrobium's behaving itself and doing everything as it should do. That's because I've had it a while, so it's settled into the routine of here, as opposed to somewhere else, then getting changed halfway through the season, which is how it was when I first got it. But we've got the new growths just starting at the base. There's a couple. There are some green root tips in amongst there. I've just had a rummage around, and the 3 canes from last year haven't got many leaves left. They've lost most of their leaves through the winter. The rest will fall off soon, and then the new growths will replace the leaves. And each one of the nodes on last year's growths has buds. Now that's the pattern, and some of these buds are looking good this year because in places there are definitely 3 blooms per node. Typically I think there were 2 last year, with the odd one with 3, whereas this year a lot of them look like they're going to have 3 blooms per node. Now they're pushing on now, they're starting to move away from the cane, so they need a bit of help at the base, so let's just add a good watering with a bit of feed and get those new growths going. And new growths hopefully will grow longer than that this year. Again, that's a lot of growth to do in a single season. It will need help. And the old canes at the back, they're never going to bloom again. Well, at least one of those will come off once these new growths get going. And these will then become, after they've bloomed, they are the old canes, yeah? And the new growths will replace them. So a nice little cycle, easy going, fully deciduous dendrobium. And quite honestly, apart from the actual business of doing the rest, they are some of the easiest to care for because they're predictable. They just do the same thing each year over and over again. With any luck they get bigger and bigger as they do it, but but they're predictable. They don't do odd things normally. They just set themselves into a routine, and you rest them in the winter, cool them down, increase the light, reduce the watering, get rid of the feed, give them a rest. And then when you start seeing the signs of the buds and the new growths, they're starting to wake up. And in the meantime, they'll have probably dumped most of their leaves, and then the new growths come on, they'll bloom, yeah? And it's just a predictable cycle. And the thing that's important with these deciduous dendrobiums, in their natural environment, they have quite a short growing season. And boy, do they get rained on. So when these are growing in their growing season, they need a lot of water. Now, all of mine are mounted. That's got to be daily. And they need elements of feed in there to push those canes on well. It's my old expression I use over and over. In the growing season, water and feed well. And you need to. They've got to produce those canes in a single growing season. And in the UK, that growing season's shorter by quite a bit than it would be in their natural environment. So I have to work hard to try and get as large a cane as possible in that growing season, which will cut off in the UK earlier than it would do in their natural environment. So it will get cut short. So I have to work hard to get those canes as large and as vigorous as possible. Okay, that'll do for this video. I've watered all my mounts. I've had a good look round them. Some got filmed. And I watered the holy clay pots and a few other pots that, although they're not scheduled to be watered, it's because of where they are. And again, this just comes back to looking at things rather than just looking at a date in my notes or you know, a gap in my notes of a frequency of watering. And although I've got that shade netting up there permanently now, I don't bother taking it down and putting it up again. It just stays there. I mean, that's the strongest sun coming in that side. But what's happening now is there's a gap before the sun gets to that tree, and it's hitting this end glass hard and hot. So everything that's in this area that wouldn't normally have been due for watering was very dry today. And also the holy clay pots were very dry. Most of those are in this area, in that clear glass. So I think we're in for a few cloudy days now with a possibility of some snow, so there's no urgency at the moment. But I need to get that shade netting up this end. The sun's getting too strong. If it can dry the pots out that quickly, I mean, some of the pots I picked up were warm to the touch, the whole pot. Well, obviously that's going to increase the evaporation dramatically, so they're drying out faster. So first thing I've observed today is that my frequency of watering now has to up, definitely. I mean, the holy clay pots have been on a sort of 4 or 5 day cycle through the winter. That's going to have to come back to a 2 or 3 day cycle, and in a month or two it'll be every other day. You know, that gives them their fast wet dry cycle that they'll need to push on the new growths. Keep them wet all the time, it's not ideal. They do like to dry in between. But yeah, the heat at this end of the grow room is starting to get to the point where it's drying off pots much quicker than I thought. So I now have to keep pace with them. I wasn't planning on watering any pots today apart from the clay pots, but and in my frequency of watering, I was due to start the cycle again tomorrow in this area. I always start here because this is the cool growers that need to stay moist. Well, obviously as the heat builds up on a daily basis and the days get longer, the frequency of watering will need to be stepped up, or I don't mind them drying off, but I don't like them staying dry for any length of time, preferably no more than a day. So I'm going to have to start up in the frequency, and the frequency on these will step up quicker than some of the other things. So I'm now going to get phased watering. Instead of going round, right, I'll water all the pots today, I'm going to have to stop and think a bit more about which ones are drying out faster, and I may even sort the pots out by that definition. I mean, these are all staying where they are simply because where they are is where they need to be. That's the coolest area, gets the shade, and even when the sun comes round this end, it doesn't find its way right back here. So they're staying where they are, definitely. I mean, it goes unnoticed, but there's a little computer fan up there that keeps this air moving constantly. And there's another one somewhere down here. Yeah, down in there, look. You can probably just about see it. So this area here has always got a constant airflow, 24/7, even at night. So that helps keep this area a little cooler than some of the other areas. Now that's why all that lot are there. They don't need high light, they need to stay cool. So it's a little microclimate, that area there. Nonetheless, things are coming into growth. You know, they're going to start using up their water quicker. And the more growth they start putting on, they might need to up the feed a little bit. But with these, no. They are all very light feeders and will not tolerate any build-up in the pot. So I keep the feed level on those very low, and I flush in between every single watering for those. But some of the other pots are going to start getting fed 2 or 3 times before they get a flush, because they're putting on good growth. So everything moves around, everything gets adjusted, everything gets thought about. Now all I'm waiting for is the Vander bucket to get up to the right level so that I can bring it back in and do the last few things that need watering for today, which are bucket dunk plants basically. There are a few of them. There's this Gigantea thing. There's my, where is it, hiding down there, my Runkeridis Bangkok Sunset, I'll get there in a minute. My 3 Vanders, and this one, this Nocturnum. This gets dunked in the bucket because if I just pour water over it, the roots don't hydrate properly. So that's become a bucket dunker. Certainly for now anyway, and there's a couple of others as well that get thrown in and left to soak because it's just that their root system, the Brassica, that's another one. Well, the bulb's swelling up nicely now. I suspect there'll be a spike on that soon. He says hopefully having a quick look. Now wait till it pokes out. But yeah, these newer roots on this latest growth, they will not hydrate if I just pour water over them, so that's become a bucket dunker as well. So I've got a few, but at the moment the water in the Vander bucket is probably about 1 degree C, so there's no way any plants are going in that. But yeah, as soon as that's full up, I'll make sure all of my bottles are now full because I've just used quite a few of my containers for today's watering, so I'll refill those and make sure everything's full, and then get the old Vander bucket in. That will be sometime this afternoon I expect, and then I'll have to spend a bit of time warming it up and get the last few watered. But yeah, everybody needs to sort of start thinking about the frequency of watering and, you know, the amount of feed that's going in dependent on what sort of growth is going on. But days are getting longer, and as long as they're longer, if the sun comes out, you're going to generate more heat during that period, and anywhere like this it'll build up, so you have to keep up with your watering and everything like that. All good fun. It's just adapting to the changes that are going on outside. The trouble is when you're inside you don't notice them so much, but your plants will tell you. They're the thing that tells you what's going on. And if you have been watering your plant every 5 or 6 days, and on that 5th day you pick it up and it's obviously bone dry, well, maybe you need to step back a bit and come back to 3 or 4 days because it's using the water faster. So yeah, keep up with your plants and have fun. Well, let's have a quick look at that. Good old Donald. Bloom's holding well. It's only a single bloom. No, I don't think the other bud's going to go. It's just going to blast. But it is a smashing bloom. It is slightly fragrant. I wouldn't say it's very fragrant, but it's nicely, pleasantly fragrant if you get close enough. But it's a lovely bloom. It's just the form of it. You know, it's mostly pure white, and it really is a pure white. And all the colours in the centre. And it all spreads out nicely. I mean, this is a mini splash pattern. I mean, some of them have a splash pattern that covers the whole of the lip, basically. But yeah, I do like it. It's a simple one, not a complex one. And it's alive, which as Miltoniopsis go is a bonus. But yeah, it's looking good. Single bloom, but yeah. Don't see any buds on the others at the moment. Okay, I'll leave it at that for this one, and then we'll see what happens as the week progresses and I start watering around the rest of the pots and see what's going on, see what's bursting into life, see what's going downhill. Hopefully not too much of that, and we'll see where we go from there. Thanks for dropping by. See you next time.